Good morning, everyone. I am Alexandra Grant of REMAX Quinte. I'm going to start this meeting now. So welcome to Buying a Home in the Country, brought to you by REMAX. Rules of the webinar. Turn your sound on mute if it's not your turn to talk. Turn your sound on when it is your turn to talk. If you want to see all panelists at once, you can turn your screen to the gallery mode. You can find this in the right-hand corner of your screen. There will be a Q&A after each speaker is done. If you don't want to talk out loud to ask your question, there is a chat bar where you can raise your hand and type your question. And the last rule, sit back and enjoy the webinar. The panelists we have today, Jeff McCarricker, A1 Plumbing. He'll be speaking about septics and wells. Ted Padley of Padley Home Inspections, speaking about home inspections. Carly Moore of Moore Mortgage Services, speaking about everything you need to know about financing a home in the country. And last but not least, myself and Steve Bartz, REMAX Realtors, talking to you about different components of an offer, the costs associated, and different elements that you need to think about when purchasing a home in the country. Topics of discussion again, well and septic service, inspections and functions, home inspection, the general process, how to finance a rural property, zoning and restrictions to look into, components of a country offer and costs associated, and reasons why you should be hiring us as a local representation. I will now turn it to Jeff McCarricker to speak about everything about wells and septics.
All right, sounds good. Good morning, everybody. As Alexa said, I'm Jeff McCarricker. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. And so I'm a licensed journeyman plumber, class 4 well technician, an on-site septic installer and inspector, and water quality specialist. So I'm also an owner partner of A1 Plumbing, Pumps and Water Treatment. We serve the Quinte region primarily, a little bit beyond that. And our focus is on residential service plumbing, pumps and wells, water treatment, drain cleaning, and of course, septic systems. So I do kind of have a unique set of skills and experience that makes me an ideal person to conduct these types of well inspections. Obviously, the licensing related to wells and septics. And just the ability to do both makes it very convenient for everybody really involved in this webinar, realtors, buyers, and sellers. We've been just focused on inspections the last few years, but I've been working in the industry my whole life. I'm a second-generation plumber. It's very much in my blood. Both my brothers are plumbers, and one of which is my business partner with A1 Plumbing. So basically just hoping to provide some valuable tips and information for kind of all stages of the buying process, from just, searching for a home on a rural property and to, of course, doing the inspections and negotiations. And then I want to leave you some resources for when you are a rural property owner and your rights and responsibilities of owning a well and septic system. Do you want me to kind of continue and dive right into things, Alexa?
No, I'll let everyone introduce themselves, if that's all right.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, Ted, you're up next. If you can introduce yourself.
Okay, I think I unmuted. Did it work?
We can hear you.
All right, I'm already way ahead of this game then. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ted Padley. I am from Padley Home Inspections Incorporated. I started this business about 4 years ago. I am a member in good standing with the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors and have been a member there for 7 years. As I said, I've been in business for 4, but a member of the Ontario Association is for 7. And the reason is when you start school for home inspections as a student, you can join the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors and then just start getting in with the crowd and start moving up in the association. So I've been a member with the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors since 2013. A little bit about home inspections, what you can expect from a home inspector. We are like a family practitioner. We go in, we'll do the full inspection. If we find problems, for instance, if we find any plumbing problems, we send you to a specialist. We say, hey, listen, we got to send you to a surgeon here because there's something going on. So a plumbing problem, of course, we'd send you to Jeff or somebody, and Jeff would come in and reassess the situation. A typical inspection lasts 2 to 3 hours, and then give us an extra hour and a half for writing up the report. When I finish an inspection, I usually give the inspection that night in written form through the computer, or you get it the next morning. I like to get my inspections done before I go to the next one, so I'm not confused on what was going on with one home and the other home. And typical inspection is literally a visual assessment of over 100 house components. When I'm walking my clients through, they pick out little things, but what they don't realize is we're looking at everything. And basically there's over 100 components and the condition of the home at the time of the inspection. For best results, inspection should be done during the daylight. I don't mind getting there just as the sun's dropping, but as long as I get the exterior done before the sun drops, so we can go inside and do the inspection. Home inspect. Do you want me to continue, Alexa, or just wait for everyone to introduce themselves?
Ted, since you actually have to go out to a home inspection shortly, you might as well just keep going.
All right, sounds great. Bye, everybody. No, I'm only. So like I said, I do give out a full digital report. It's very easy to read. Typical inspections, 30 to 35 pages. It's all pictures, and I write the problem right on the picture, so there's no fine print, it's right there. This is what I found. This is what you need to do. And like I said, and it'll say, recommendation, go see Jeff. This is a plumbing problem. Recommendation, go see an electrician. That's how my reports are. We cannot provide, and this is something that Alexa and all agents should know, we cannot provide an opinion on market value. You wouldn't be, it's amazing how clients get me in the driveway and they go, oh, what do you think? How much is this worth? Our standards say we cannot offer an opinion on market value. I do not, and because I'm a member of the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors, anytime you get an Ontario Association of Home Inspector, they will not give you a pass or fail grade. We give you what we saw, and then we give you ideas on how to fix it, and approximate costs. We do not give purchase recommendations. I do not stand out there and go, hey, listen, I'd buy this house in a second, or run. No inspector will do that. Like I say, we'll let the client know what needs to be done for the repairs or for the services. And if I could just touch a little bit, since I have everybody's attention, things you can do when you're selling your home. This really helps us home inspectors. I'll just go through a little bit of a list here. When we're coming in, you as the home owner, you want to sell your home. So it's a good idea to do these things to make it easy for the inspector and make it easy for us to explain to our clients what's going on in the home. For instance, out in the country especially, make sure all utilities are hooked up. Sometimes we go to a home where a guy, they're snowbirds and the home is still winterized. The water's not on, and a bunch of other things. So ensure all utilities are hooked up. It's a good idea when you're having a home inspection to trim back bushes just a little bit so that we can take a look at the cladding. Exterior walls, sometimes bushes, they block up our vents and we can't see them. So it's always good to do these couple things when you're selling your home. Wherever possible, move the storage away from the walls on the interior so we can get a good look at structure. Keeping electrical outlets accessible and replace burnt out lights. I go to a lot of homes where we're flipping on lights and they're all up above the vanity in the bathrooms. So it's always good to keep up on your lights when you're trying to sell your home. Ensure all pilot lights are on. I go to many homes where they have a beautiful gas fireplace and my clients, they want to see it and they haven't got the pilot on. inspectors can't turn on pilots when we're in a house. We can't touch any of that until you're actually an owner. Well, I got something else written here. What was it? Oh yeah. Please ensure that the inspector has access to all the mechanical systems in the home, including the furnace, the water heater, the gas meter, electrical panels, water meters, and valves. Here's the most important one. Always make sure we have access to the attic. You would, well, you might be surprised, but you wouldn't be surprised. You'd be surprised how many people walk away from a home because we cannot get into the attic. Be it a whole bunch of screws in there or too tiny, or we just can't get at it. So always make sure that your attic has access, that we can get up there and take a look into the attic. I had a small access yesterday, as a matter of fact. I was actually doing an inspection for an electrician. He'd already been through the home, and he really didn't care about the electrical work. And I said, did you get up to the attic? And he said, no, we couldn't get up there. It was all screwed down, attic hatch was too small. So I got permission from the owner, and I said, hey, listen, I'd like to take a look in this attic. They called the owner said, yeah, by all means, go on up. Zip, I took out all the screws, and in there was all knob and tube, active. So, I mean, that was a great lesson for the electrician who was buying that house. And again, we don't say run. We don't say, hey, this is knob and tube. We just give them ideas and give them names on who can come in and fix that and approximate costs. And he was quite, he was so happy that we saw what was going on in the attic. So some little tips. If any of you want me to write these things down and send them to you, I'd be more than happy to do that for you.
Ted, maybe you can you can share. I'm just going to start the Q&A for you. What's some of the worst things that you've ever seen that people have walked away from?
Well, again, in the attic, we had a house. The people that owned the house, they were living there, and they did beautiful interior work. Now, these people, they did have an inspector before they moved in, and the inspector said everything's good. Again, they had an attic that was screwed down. Their inspector said, I can't go into the attic. Fast forward, now there's a young couple, my clients, they want to buy this house. And luckily the owners they stayed there at the house. So when I'm walking my clients through, I see the attic is all screwed up. So I asked my client, I asked the owners of the home if I can show my clients the attic. No problem. Zip, zip, zip. The house was built in 1895. And back in the day, attics would suffer smoldering fires. They would smolder for months, and people living in the home would never know it. So when I got into that attic, all the joists were burnt. I couldn't figure out how the roofing system and the sheathing was still up. You just touch it, it was flaking away. So that was, and then, I mean, I've gone into basements where, I'll be in a kitchen and the floor's bouncy, and when I get into the basement, people have actually used fire logs stacked on each other to create a post to make the house stand. So of course we need a structural consultant at that point because the whole house was MacGyvered. So yeah, I've seen a lot of crazy things. Bad decks. Decks are the worst. Bad cantilevering, not using the proper materials. And of course, when people are looking at homes, they're going, oh, I can't wait to move in here, sit my coffee on the deck and that. And then I say, hey, listen, this deck needs all kinds of work. So yeah, decks are a big thing too. So.
All right, I'm just going to take a moment.
Alexa. I actually have pictures of that burnt attic and the bad structure. If you guys ever wanted to see it, I'll send it to you. They'll blow your mind like it's crazy.
Okay. Anyone that is an attendee of the seminar, if you want to unmute and ask Ted a question or write in the Q&A or chat box, then please feel free to at this time.
That's maddening. I'm only kidding.
That's okay. Everyone's probably cold from the snow and just wants to sit back and relax and not raise their hand to ask a question. All right, well, thank you, Ted. We're going to move on to our next panelist. We have, we're still going to do some introductions. So Ted, if you need to take off, you certainly can at any point. Just going to share my screen here again.
Sorry, Alexa. Yeah, I'm good till at least 1:45. I told you that earlier, but I think I can stretch that out. The place I'm going to isn't as far. So.
Okay, perfect.
This is interesting. I like to hang around.
Sure. Okay, Carly, if you could just do a little introduction about yourself, and then I'll come back to you. The rest of the panelists, you can come back to the segments you're going to talk about, but if you could just do a quick little intro, that'd be great.
Sure, no problem. So hi, everyone. My name is Carly Moore. I am a mortgage agent with Moore Mortgage Services. We are an independent brokerage. The head office is in Sterling, Ontario. I operate out of Picton. I service Prince Edward County and all the surrounding area. So lots of rural properties and areas to service. So I'm looking forward to shedding a little bit of light on some of the things you can expect from the financial side of purchasing a country home.
Great, thank you. Steve, you're up next.
Everybody, just a little bit about myself. Before I got into real estate, I spent 9 years out west on the oil rigs and working for CN Rail. It was pretty hard work, long hours, long stretches of weeks at a time. And I was able to incorporate that and bring that over into my business as a real estate agent, which I'm happy it all ended the way that it did, because I love my career. I've been in this business for almost 5 years now, and proud to say that I work with the team that you see on your screen. They're all very smart, competent, capable, ethical people. And I love being able to meet new people virtually every day, see new homes, and see new problems to solve for my clients, and work through transactions and everything like that. It's not, there's never a dull moment. And with that, I'll return it back to you, Alexa.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Grant. I work for Remax Quinte. I am a licensed realtor. I have been since 2012. I started as an administration for a team in Kingston, Ontario, and I worked for them for a year to make sure that this industry is what I want to do. I actually have always had the dream of wanting to be a realtor, and my mother said at age 4 I was clipping out the newspaper real estate section, following which homes have sold and which homes are new on the market. So I guess I was destined to come into this career. I specialize in negotiations, customer service, and marketing. I took marketing at Algonquin College in 2006 to 2007. And before my career in real estate, I was actually a licensed insurance broker for 3 years. So I started the service industry back in my young 20s, and I started as a realtor still in my young 20s, and it was difficult not having parents that were realtors and having to get out there and have that baby face on and get people to trust me and to start up my own book of business. But here I am. Last year I sold 49 homes. I work a lot with rural homes. I don't just list homes. I obviously work with a lot of buyers. And this year I've already completed 27 sales. So I've completed a lot of courses and training, and I love what I do, and I have a lot of passion for it. That's pretty much all I have to say at this point in time. So I will get the meat and bones of this seminar started. So we will start with Jeff. If you can talk about your plumbing. If you do you have some screens that you want to share with some information, Jeff?
I'm going to give it a try. We'll see. Yeah. So.
Okay. So I'll stop the share now and turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. So good morning again. I'll save you the introduction. We've already done that, and dive right into what we'll call Wells 101, Septics 101, a little bit about what inspections look like when you call us for an inspection, and maybe we'll have some time for some questions after. So I think my biggest takeaway point that I want to make is that when buying a rural property, you have this private source of water on site. You also have this private wastewater treatment system right on site, and it gives a feeling of self-sufficiency and independence. But it also means that you now have a responsibility for that piece of land and the neighboring lands. So we very much as rural property owners have to be conservationists and good stewards of the land as well. It's a really important point to make with both these symptoms here. To talk about that a little bit further, when we dig a hole in the ground and, you know, drilling a well, you're going down and you're bypassing years of soil and rock formations that naturally filter that water, which is out as rainwater. And then when it becomes deep, becomes that pure water that we drink. So it's really important to maintain that system to keep it safe and keep those deep water aquifers safe for everybody. A lot like a septic system uses the soil to also treat those that water. And when you flush your toilet, it eventually gets dispersed out and in your own yard. And the idea is a system that's installed properly and maintained properly, that wastewater gets treated before it reaches any of our kind of resources like lakes and ponds and of course well. So some definite, you know, responsibilities there in owning rural property and having that independence. So let's start with, I'm looking over at my notes. Every time I look away, I got this board up here. So septic systems 101. So septic systems in general have two main components, the tank and the leaching bed. There's many different types of systems. There's advanced treatment systems, but for the sake of keeping things short, the majority of the systems out there that we're going to see are going to be a tank and leaching bed type system. So I'm going to try to throw another picture up here while I talk. So the septic tank. So the septic tank has a partition wall that separates the solids, an inlet and outlet pipe where the effluent comes from the house and also where it leaves to the leaching field, and then baffles. And these baffles serve a different purpose. The inlet coming in from the house helps the baffle or helps the effluent go down underneath the sludge layer. And the outlet baffle stops any solids that might get in that liquid part of the tank from going to the leaching field. And a good idea, it's also building code now and has been for a while, is having a filter on that outlet side so that if there is any solids that get past that partition wall in the tank, they can't get past the filter is the idea of that. It's a bit more maintenance, but is a good idea and is now building code on some newer systems. The leaching field, so effluent leaves the septic tank, goes out into a leaching field, typically is a system of perforated pipes where it leaches down into the soil. Sometimes that's the native soil that was on the property. More times it's imported soil, especially on newer systems. But in any case, that effluent leaches down through that soil, gets naturally filtered out, and is eventually treated within that contact area before it can, you know, contaminate anything nearby. So that, I think, is a quick rundown on septic systems. We get a lot of questions about raised beds, a lot of concern about, especially when there's a failing system, is this the, you know, do I have to have this big mound in my yard? Or people wonder what that is when they're looking at properties that have that mound in their yard. So stricter regulations around septic systems make it harder to have a conventional in-ground leaching bed. So there's strict soil requirements and space that you need to have in order to have those in-ground beds. And that's why we see more and more of those mounds in people's yards. And they require a third component. Obviously, you can't gravity feed your effluent and your wastewater to that bed anymore. So now you have to have a pumping chamber where it gets pumped up to that field. So they scare a lot of people, I think, and they can be an eyesore given the property, but with a good septic installer and a good designer, that system can be kind of fit into the landscape in some situations and last a really long time. So it's kind of the way of the world in septic systems now. They're more and more common to see. So
do you want to see if anyone has any questions about the septic systems before I go?
Yep.
Okay. This is your time to type in the chat bar if you have any questions. Maybe not. We do have one question for Carly, but we'll get to that when it's your turn. Oh. Typing 1 second. Okay, Sarah, I'll wait for you to, do you want to answer live or type your? Please proceed. Give her a moment here. Is there a way to visually tell there are any issues with the septic before the next step to inspect?
I think that was well timed, because what I'm going to do is dive into kind of the inspection process. So if Sarah could let us know if that question got answered within that. So the inspection process of the septics are a visual inspection of the tank.
Oh, another one, sorry, that you'll have to answer. Are there non-compliant septic systems grandfathered? And then if you can also answer, what's the cost of replacing a whole system and how often you should have it pumped?
Right. So pumping is typically 3 to 5 years. That's the kind of general consensus. If you have an older system or a sensitive system, of obviously being on the lower end of that maintenance, and being on the lower end of that maintenance all the time is good. So 3 to 5 is what the industry says. Replacement costs, I'm going to give a very broad range, but also realistic. It may be lower than that. It can all definitely be higher than that, but 15 to 25,000 to replace a modern septic system. But again, that's being really broad.
Okay. There was another question as well. So looking at buying a property in the inspector, it looked like the septic system had been sunken. What would have caused that?
A lot of different things could cause that. If they're talking about like out in a leaching field, a depression in a leaching field could be that portion of the bed is oversaturated. Maybe a fault due to original installation, and you know the ground there had kind of sunk in. It's hard to say what might cause it without looking into it a little bit further. So again, going into the inspection part of what I had to say, I might answer some of these. So I'll jump ahead and then we'll go back to the questions if they didn't get answered. Got the thumbs up from Alexa. So the inspections that we do, the basic real estate inspection is a visual inspection of the tank. So looking for all those components like we were talking about earlier. So the condition of the lids and the manholes, are the baffles there? Are they intact? Does the inside of the tank look like? The partition wall, they can erode away. Is that concrete in good shape? Is the tank separating solids? So a lot of what we can see just from pulling the lids and having a look. We do want to see them with, you know, ideally not recently pumped. And that kind of gives some indicators too of has the system failed before? There's different things we can look for. The second part of the inspection is a way to test the leaching field. So we do that by putting a demand on the leaching field by running water, typically just from the house through the septic tank out to the leaching field. And we want to measure that liquid level in the tank to make sure it doesn't rise. If it rises, it means it's having a hard time going out to the field. And that's what typically happens on an older system or a compromised system, where that effluent can't leave the tank and can't leach away. So that's a sign of a failure that we would have to look into and definitely note. So between the visual inspection of the septic tank and the demand test, that is most of what a real estate inspection looks like, unless we move on, and in some cases we do, to what I would call like a phase 2 inspection, which could mean a couple different things. It might be getting a record search from the municipality to see what the original design of was a bed, mapping the system and double checking setbacks from things like wells and houses and pools, and maybe digging some holes in the leaching field to assess where that liquid level is out there, and maybe that, finding out the bed's saturated. We also can use tools like drain cameras and that to look into a little deeper. But those phase 2 inspections are definitely not as common as your standard inspection that I spoke of earlier. So let me know if you would dive back to any septic related questions, Alexa, before I continue on.
Yeah, we didn't answer Jerry's necessarily are non-compliant septic systems grandfathered. Well, like if they're older systems and they're not meeting today's code.
I wouldn't say they're. It's a tough question to answer. Systems are, just because they're not compliant to today's code, it doesn't mean that they have to be, taken down. They can continue to exist. When they do need to be replaced, they need to be replaced to today's standards. But there is a spot in a building code where you can say, if there was a system here, we can, argue that we're going to do our best job at designing it to meet code, given that it already had a system here. And in most cases, that can stop you being forced into a situation where you have no option. So that can be used. So I guess in a way, yes, some older systems can be grandfathered where the new system would allow to have some modifications of the building code. But there's also situations where that the answer to that from the building code would be no, because maybe it's too close to the water or well, and they're not going to allow it regardless. So.
Okay, and Brenda, does a home inspector check the septic system, or do you have to get a specialist to check it? I'll start. So I usually, when I'm hiring and recommending as a realtor, I always recommend that a home inspector does the home, because that's what they're best at. There are some home inspectors that say that they can do all of these inspections. However, they may not be licensed for that. So you really need to watch that. So you have to be licensed even to pop the top off of a well, things like that. So there are some that do say that they can, but they're not really the specialists at that. So that's why we hire 2 specialists to come in. And we typically have it staggered the inspection day. So I'll have Ted start at the house, and when he's getting near to the end, we'll have Jeff come in and start. And I'll go over some of the cost of that too. But I'll let Jeff answer why you should hire a specialist that knows wells and septics over just a general home inspector.
Yeah, I think Alexa did a good job at answering that question. There's definitely home inspectors out there that have the knowledge of septic systems. The only thing I would add to that is that septic systems do have their own governing body of regulations. So the septic system is governed by the Ontario Building Code, of course. You should have an inspector that has a BCIN number and is listed as a septic system installer and inspector, and has taken that course and has those credentials.
Ted, did you have anything to add to that? Like, are you guys even licensed to be able to do that?
What I can add to that is at our education conferences with the Ontario Association of Home Inspectors, we can pick different courses that we'd like to take. And this year, one of my courses was septic and well inspections. Just because I took that course and I'm up on what goes on in the septic system doesn't mean I can go there, pop the top off and do an inspection. It's always best to get A1 Plumbing like Jeff in there, guys who are licensed to do it. I would never put myself in a position where I'm popping off the top, and I mean, if anybody ever got word of that. Well, I'm not qualified to do that. I've learned about the inspection process, but I'm not, and a lot of inspectors are not licensed to do it.
Just want to add too that Jeff actually, his company actually installs them, whereas a lot of home inspectors are not installers and excavation specialists. So this is why we hire a plumber, an excavation company that knows how to install these systems, because they know best how they function. But we'll let Jeff continue with well talk now.
All right, so I'll dive into Wells 101. So the Ministry of Environment is the governing body of wells in Ontario and have made the wells regulation. They're the ones that allow us to do our jobs as well technicians, and also inform and enforce owners of wells on the regulation. Two common types of wells.
Jeff, just quick, sorry, someone asked, what's your cost for just a septic inspection, and then your cost for a well?
So our costs for septic inspections are $195 plus HST. In our general area. Outside of that, travel fees might apply. Septic inspections are $250 plus HST, not including travel. If you do the bundle, then you can save $45 that way. So that's our pricing for those.
Okay, perfect.
So again, the two most common types of wells that we're going to see is a dug well or a drilled well. So a dug well typically is machine dug, like with an excavator, of course. Older systems could be hand dug. They're shallow wells. So, you know, the depths that we see in our area seem to be like 10 to 30 feet. They have a large diameter casing, so usually concrete. Again, older systems, you got stone wall. They do have a corrugated steel, you see, as well. But again, usually the dug wells are concrete casing. And they get their water from shallow water sources. So they do have more of a potential for contamination. If they're installed correctly, of course, that's less. And they also have a larger seasonal fluctuation of well yield. So that number that we're able to get for you can fluctuate more through the season, typically on a dug well than it would on a drilled well. But they can also have a greater amount of reserve water, which I'll touch on quickly after. The second type of well that we're going to briefly talk about is a drilled well. So a drilled well has a smaller well casing diameter. It's usually steel, and they're drilled with a drilling rig. They can also be shallower, 30 feet, but in our area, they seem to range from anywhere from 30 to 200, but of course there's exceptions to that. We have 300-400 foot deep wells in our area. They're less susceptible to surface water contamination if they're installed and maintained correctly, and typically means less reserve water. And they can present more challenges with water treatment. The deeper we go, the more mineral we have, iron, sulfur, and creates treatment needs. So quickly, I mentioned reserve twice. The reserve amount is the amount of water you have on hand. I guess the best way of explaining it is before your production value seems relevant. So you're using up that water and you're out, and then now you're relying on the reduction of the. So that means is that a gallon a minute in a dug well can look a lot different than a gallon a minute in a drilled well, because that dug well can have 600 gallons on reserve, where some drilled wells may only have 4. So it's important to ask questions with the inspector when they give you numbers. What does that mean for my house, my family, and trying to get kind of the best picture painted there for that. Well location is also important, and this applies with septics too. Where is it installed in relation to everything else on the property? And we want to make sure that it's away from any sources of contamination, of course, like oil tanks, garages, farms, livestock, roads. So it's definitely an important part about wells is where they're located. Well construction, we won't go too much into that, but in inspections there are certain things we're looking for, like the height above grade that a well casing is. In saying that, one thing we get a lot of questions about, and we see a lot of in our area during these inspections, is well pits. So well pits are drilled wells that usually get mistaken for dug wells. And there's a picture of one. So it's a drilled well that's down in a larger casing. So the drilled well is actually below grade, and it's an outdated type of construction because we didn't have the plumbing technology back then to prevent lines from freezing. So there is a drilled well that's just hidden. And these types of well pits are more susceptible to contamination. They're a service, to be honest, perspective, and the Ministry of Environment likes to see those upgrades. So when we go out inspection and we see a well pit, you have a blanket statement out on there about that the well is upgraded. It's also a good thing for your property value because you do have drilled well there. People typically prefer that. So you get the drilled well casing above grade. You moved, have the soil so it's shedding water away from the well casing, and put a nice new seal on it and a well tag, and you're good to go. So that's a bit about well pits. Getting water from the well. Again, I got to really glaze over this topic, but there's different types of pumps. Jet pumps, which is what you're going to have in your house. You're going to see it and hear it running. It may need to be primed when you have issues, and it draws the water from the well. The other common type is a submersible pump, where it's going to push the water from the well. You can't see or hear the pump work. There's no need to prime it. Both have their own set of advantages and disadvantages, but talk to a pump installer, a licensed well technician, and ask some questions during your inspection about the type of pump that's there. Water quality, the type of water you're also getting out of your well is important. Again, it's a really long topic, but there's different things, aesthetic, taste, odor, color that you're going to see, and some things that have impacts on plumbing fixtures and appliances, and some things that have impact on health. So when it comes to water quality, Alexa could probably talk a little bit about this too. We don't do the health unit bacteria inspections, but it's usually part of a real estate deal. So the health unit will test for free E. coli and coliform. Your other water testing you're going to get from a local water treatment professional, your water quality testing for things like hardness, iron, sulfur, and more. And in some cases, your water treatment professional can escalate that to an actual lab test, which will give a full profile to properly design a system. In my opinion, and being in water treatment, a very basic well system, water treatment system that we like to see is a water softener and a UV light. All wells in our area are going to have a certain amount of minerals and hardness, and it's good to remove those. And a UV light is just cheap insurance against any type of bacteria. So it's not a one size fits all. Those are things that we like to see, but it's important, like with anything in pumps and plumbing and water treatment, that it's sized appropriately for the home. I can
so
keep going or take a break.
Jack asked, how often should water quality be tested? And how does hard water affect wells?
Water quality should be tested in respect to bacteria in the health unit testing. I believe they suggest annually. If you're doing that, doing better than 90% of people out there. But I would say often as possible. And if you do have a bad test, do it more often and talk to a well technician or a water treatment person to figure out how you can mitigate that issue. So you have to look at it as an approach of how to correct it at the source out in the well, what is causing that contamination, and then treat it in the home like a UV light. If you're doing one without the other, then you're not doing a complete job of it. So.
All right, and how does hard water affect, I guess, our household? Or affect the well? I think he means the household.
So it's, and that's what I think too. And it's not so much an effect on the well itself, but plumbing fixtures, appliances, they're going to get scaled up. So a water heater is, water softener removes that hardness. It removes a bit of iron, and stops that scaling. So, some people just like it because they use a lot less soap in the washing machine, in the shower. They can feel that silky feeling of soft water. As plumbers, we like it because that water heater is going to last longer. Those faucets are going to be easier to service because they don't have the mineral deposits on them. So it prolongs the life of everything in your plumbing system.
Yeah, as a female, I hate hard water. I can feel the guffiness in my hair if my salt levels in my softener are getting low. So definitely important to treat that if you have long hair. Does anyone else have any questions at this time for Jeff? Guess not. Jeff, do you have anything else to add?
Let me know if you need to cut me short, but there is a couple things I wanted to kind of glaze over, but if you want to give me 2 more minutes, I can wrap it up.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so the well inspection part of it, I don't think I touched on yet. Hopefully I'm not doubling it up. So our primary focus is a well production yield, that gallons per minute number that everybody's looking for. And that's the amount that the well produces. So in order to find that, we have to create a drawdown on the well using a pump of our own, or usually the pump that's in the well right now as part of these real estate inspections. And we need to draw down the well and measure its recovery so we can tell you if that well is going to meet the needs of the family. But there's also secondary things that are important to look for too, and that's the condition of the well, the condition of the pumping system, and a good well technician that's performing these inspections can give you a bit more information too, and that reserve amount we talked about. Inspections and how they look with me. Usually they're coordinated by a realtor. Sometimes they're just coordinated by the buyer themselves if you're seeking out that person in that community, or through a home inspector. We try to twin the inspections up with other inspections. We're happy to work with home inspectors. We offer at A1 Plumb the well and septic package because we carry those 2 different licenses. And you can participate in that inspection process and ask questions, and we'll give you a verbal rundown of everything throughout and at the end, and we'll follow it up with a detailed report, typically the same day. They take a couple hours on average. If you get bad news in an inspection, it's not a deal breaker. This is where the realtor comes in when you're working with good realtors like Alexa and Steve, is that they're not afraid of bad news. When we uncover something in the well or septic, it's typically a big component of that real property, and they need to do their job as a now to support you through that and figure out how to get it rectified and save you some money. And it's an example of how $500 well and septic inspection or home inspection can save you $5,000 or more. So definitely find a good inspector that is reputable so that report holds weight when they come and investigate me and my background, because they're looking at a report. It's important that that's going to hold weight. And then find a good realtor that's going to use that as a tool in negotiations. And a quick disclaimer, things fluctuate seasonally. Not all failures can be uncovered. It's kind of a point in time look at things, but they're very effective and they're very important. Bad wells and bad septics show themselves all the time during these real estate inspections, but there's also some gray areas. So we can't expect an inspector to tell us how many years there's left on a septic system or what is this well going to produce midsummer. But it's a very important tool to use. So always include inspections.
Okay, so a couple questions that I can think of to ask you. What is the average person use in water in a household? How many gallons a day?
They say 75 gallons a day per person.
Okay. And Carly, I have never been to the banks ever asking for a certain amount of gallons per minute. I know they used to. It's now they concentrate potability. Is there any lenders out there that still want to see, that don't like, backup trickle systems, just having cisterns for water sources, or, low gallons per minute in a well? Do you run into any issues with that?
No, not usually. Now they're mostly just looking for the water potability, like you said. Sometimes on a new build, though, they'll be looking for well and septic certificates and inspections there. But that's pretty much what we see now.
Okay, perfect. Does anyone else have any questions for Jeff about wells? Guess not. All right.
Sorry, I think I might have a bad connection, but
Yeah, no, it's no problem. Living in the country comes with no fiber optics, so. Okay, Jeff, is there anything else that you want to add, or?
no, I'll let someone else dive in there, but happy to answer more questions if we have time at the end.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to share my screen. So we're going into Carly Moore talking about how to finance a country property. Carly, I will, there is one pending question for you. I'm just going to pull it up here. Okay, when Carly speaks, Jack is asking, what does the low national interest rate mean to home buyers, and how does it impact the price of houses?
So I think what Jack's asking or speaking about is the Bank of Canada overnight lending rate that is quite low right now. Typically, there's 8 predetermined dates that they will set this rate, but because the market was so volatile and the economy was changing so much, they did do a few emergency rate changes. So now we see the overnight lending rate at about 0.25%. So I think that's what he's talking about, and that does affect the rates that you'll get on your mortgages. Mostly it's tied to your variable rate mortgages. So with a variable rate mortgage, it's based off prime, a percentage off prime, and so that's probably so that's when you'll see lower interest rates. But overall, we are seeing lower interest rates. So this is a good thing for home buyers. Obviously, when you're securing a mortgage, rate is not the only factor, but it is an important piece of the puzzle. So lower rates are obviously ideal. So it's a good thing for home buyers, maybe not the best thing for the economy, but good thing for home buyers for sure. So hopefully that answers Jack's question. And I guess I can carry on, unless it doesn't answer, then he can let us know. But I'll carry on with a few of the things that I was hoping to discuss. So I'll start first with down payments. So down payments are what you have to have, the money you have to have on closing day. And it can come from a few different sources. So it can come from your personal savings, RSPs, can even be gifted money from your immediate family member. And if you're pulling from your RSPs, you can actually pull $35,000 out under the home buyer's plan, tax-free, and you have 15 years to pay that back before you get taxed on it. So in respects to down payments, there's kind of 2 different mortgages. You have your high ratio mortgage and you have your conventional mortgage. So your high ratio mortgage, you're looking at a down payment between 5 and 20%. A conventional mortgage, you're looking at least 20% or more. So with these high ratio mortgages, this is where you'll also have to be approved for mortgage default insurance. So there's 3 insurers in Ontario that we work with that do this, and this insurance is a premium that's added to your mortgage amount. So you pay it off over the life of your mortgage. And what it does is it protects the lender, not the borrower, but it does give you that flexibility on having a lower down payment. So you don't have to save up as much to purchase a home. So this, if we're speaking about raw land or a farm, an active farm, the down payment requirements will be a little bit different, but for just your regular country home property, this is kind of what you can expect. Some lenders, they may require an appraisal. This is usually triggered sometimes by the insurers, the default insurers. Often you'll see it in a conventional mortgage, And mostly you'll see it if the property you're purchasing has more than 5 acres. And the important aspect of this appraisal is lenders will lend on what's known as the residential lending value. So this is a value that's based off of your house, your garage, and 5 to 10 acres, depending on the lender. And if you have additional outbuildings or additional acreage, that is not usually considered in the value of this residential lending value. So this is significant because if your purchase price is greater than your residential lending value, that difference in the amount will have to come out of your pocket. It's not going to be factored in to the mortgage amount. So really important when you're shopping for properties to kind of take that factor into consideration. Another thing that a lender may request is the water potability certificate, which we touched on a little bit earlier. Usually a realtor will help you with this. It's just collecting a water sample and sending it into your municipality for analysis, just so that the lender can see that the water is fit for human consumption. And one other thing I did want to touch on is sort of restricted areas. So lenders look at the marketability of a property. And when you are located in a rural area, so at a distance from an urban center, and particularly a distance from an urban center that has a lower population, the lenders will typically view these areas as less marketable. So what that means is if a borrower were to default and the lender had to take over the property and sell it, typically it takes a little bit longer to sell these kind of properties. So it comes at a greater risk for the lender to lend here. So there are some lenders who will not lend in certain areas. So 2 things come out of this. One, make sure to have in your offer a condition on financing, and don't waive that until you get the go ahead to do so. And the second thing is I encourage you to work with a local mortgage broker in the area that you're going to purchase. They will know the lenders that will lend in that area for you, and they can help you out a bit more quickly and more accurately there. The other bonus to working with mortgage brokers is that we can guide you to specific products. So for instance, not a lot of people know about our Purchase Plus Improvements mortgage product. This is a product where, say you find a nice home that you like, but it requires a little bit of improvements. We can actually factor the renovation costs into the mortgage amount, so you can pay that off over the lifetime of your mortgage, as opposed to having to put that cash up front right away. So some benefits there as well. So anyways, those are just kind of a quick, concise, in a nutshell, what you can expect with purchasing a rural property for the mortgage finance aspect. But any questions? I'm ready.
Not seeing any at the moment, but
Okay.
I
Well,
will let everyone know too, the potable water testing, it's free. The health unit provides a service. So if anyone's wondering about that. Come on, there's got to be lots of questions about mortgages, especially during COVID right now.
And if anyone comes up with any questions they think of later, feel free to email, call, anything like that. I'd be happy to take the questions.
Again, here's Carly's information if you want to reach out to her. You can also send me an email as well if you want everyone's information. So the areas that we service are Napanee, which is Lennox and Addington, Tyonega Township, Prince Edward County, Quinte West, Hastings, Belleville. So it's quite a large area, and a little bit into Brighton as well, which is North Cumberland.
I might have a quick question for Carly, if I can.
Sure,
Sure.
go ahead.
So in those situations, let's say we have Ted doing the home inspection, I'm there doing the well and septic inspection, and the clients are working with you for a mortgage, and we uncover, a big ticket repair item. So how can you support them in the purchase price of the house and also any additional work that may need to be done?
Yeah, well, as I was saying, like there is the Purchase Plus improvements mortgage that you could look into. So you could look at adding any repairs into your mortgage amount. So that's one way to do it. There's always a solution. So you know, we as mortgage brokers, we don't just represent one lender. We have access to multiple lenders. So if you know your A lender is not going to take the property or there's issues there, we have private lending as well. So you can always set up a second mortgage or line of credit or something like that to try and help you cover these costs, as long as it works with the debt servicing. So we'd have to factor that into your liabilities, but as long as it works, we could do it that way as well. So there's always a solution. Sometimes it just takes a little creativity.
Okay, we have a couple questions that have come in. We'll start with Ali. What is the minimum percentage needed when buying a house property? So down payment. Do you want to talk about expand on if the house has 5+ acres and us as realtors have valued, say, the house value and 5 acres is worth 250, but then the remaining 100 acres is worth 250, so the total asking price is 500,000. And you're saying that you're going to give 80% appraised value of the 250. Is there any lenders that will appraise the value of the outbuildings and the land? How do you go about that? Do they need more than 5% down? Will they have to pay cash? I guess talk about too, if they are running it as a business and a farm, how they would go about that.
Sure. So typically, as I said, minimum down payment would be 5%. But if it is an acreage, so there are more than 5 to 10 acres, that's not, and it's not valued in the appraisal, then you will have to pay that out of your pocket. So there are options though. So there are some lenders who deal with farm and active income from an active farm. So you can go that route too. Typically for those, the down payment will vary. It'll vary so much based on who the lender will be and what the property is like, but you can expect to put at least 35% down, 25 to 35% down if you're looking at like a farm property or something with a little bit more acreage or raw land. So hopefully, does that sort of answer the question?
What if they're just using it for recreational use? Is there any lenders that will appraise 80% of the household and land if they're not using it for a farm?
Yeah, if there's property there, there's lots of different lenders. So, you know, typically you have like your A lenders and the big banks, and then you have alternative lenders, mortgage investment companies. There's even private mortgage lenders that we work with. So it'll just depend on the how the property kind of qualifies, how the borrower qualifies as well. But there's always a solution. So you might just have to go with a private mortgage, which you'd see a higher interest rate, or an alternative lender as well, which would have a little higher interest rate too. But there was definitely going to be a solution for you.
What about those private lenders? What would they typically want for a down payment for a property like that? You were saying 35%?
Yeah, usually it's around there, 35%.
Okay, and Vic has a question. I have a property that I put an offer on. I plan to pay the property in full on closing, so no mortgage. The real estate agent selling this 50+ acre property insists that the HST is applicable on the sale of the farm. The last owner said the farm had never been used commercially, which he owned it, yet the selling agent still insists that HST applies. Is there a way around this paying HST, as it is a factor, and I may have to back away from purchasing this property? I kind of know the answers to that if you don't.
Yeah, I'll maybe let you take this one. I don't know that one.
So purchasing, and Vic, I have a full PDF about this. So if you want to email me to read over it too, but I'll just kind of go over it generically. So if the farm ever produced an income, even if the farmer had retired and wasn't farming the property anymore, but it was actually registered as a business, it would apply to HST. But what applies to HST is they take out the house and the 5 hectares value. So 5 hectares is, I believe, about 10 acres. So they would take that out, and then the value of the land that's remaining would be HST applicable. If you're purchasing it for recreational use, I would argue with the seller that it's not your fault that that is the case, and I would look at making them pay the HST. That's something that your agent really has to negotiate with them. If you are going to be using it for business use, you can register your own HST number, and it would just be a wash. But then you would be dealing with this issue again when you go to sell, who pays the HST. But it's not just as easy as registering an HST number. There is limitations that if you're ever audited, you have to make a certain amount of income on the property. So that changes and varies. So I believe it's $5,000 to $9,000 a year that you would have to be making on the property. But again, this is a better question really for your accountant to get around this. But if you want me to send you some forms on this, I have a whole generic form about this scenario, because I do quite a bit of farm properties.
Alexa, I have to get going now. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this.
Thanks, Ted.
If anybody out there has any questions on home inspections, please send them to Alexa. She'll get them to me and I'll answer everybody's questions if they come in a little later.
There's Ted's information if anyone wants to write it down.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Great seeing you.
Thanks, Ted.
Bye for now.
Okay, Carly, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much covers most of the quick and dirty stuff anyways.
Okay. Steve, it's your turn. So introduce yourself and a little bit more, and I'll bring up your topic here again. So I'm just going to mute myself first.
All right. Yeah, so one of the topics that I'm going to discuss today is the amenities. Just looking at the screen here too. Yeah, so one of the things I think a lot of people do when they first start looking for a home is spending a lot of time on realtor.ca and looking at properties and seeing what they like. But one important thing to always remember, obviously, are the amenities, like what parks or shopping and the proximity to the property that you're interested in. If you're looking at doing some business from home, you want to make sure that a rural property is going to be able to have high-speed internet. So you're going to want to have a local agent that's going to have the knowledge of what providers are going to be in the area. Little things like garbage sanitary, is it going to be curbside pickup? How much are garbage tags, where to get them? Or if you are going to have to take your garbage to a dump, where is the dump located and the cost associated? Same with restaurants. So this is obviously, again, where a local realtor is going to come in very handy to know what restaurants are the good ones and the good dishes on the menu and which ones to stay away from. And more importantly, schools. A lot of moms, when they're looking for a home, they want to make sure that the schools that their children are going to be going to have good reputations, and a local realtor is going to know that. Any extracurricular activities and classroom sizes and things like that. Some other important things that we're going to talk about today as well is the importance of zoning. There are many different designations in the rural community that can apply, but it really comes down to basically your search criteria when you're speaking with your realtor of what you're looking for. The real estate agent that you're speaking with is going to be able to pick up on the zoning that's going to be best for you and can already think of the areas in the rural community that would be best suited for you. Some of those zonings are going to be specific if you're looking to have, for example, like a horse farm or an Airbnb setup, or you could be looking for an investment property with a duplex, maybe a bed and breakfast, or you're looking to purchase agricultural land. And when you're basically going over that search with your realtor, they're probably already going to know certain areas that you're looking in for what homes are actually already on the market, and they can send them to you right away. And you could possibly just start looking into them as well. What else do I got here? Because I'm like Jeff, I'm looking at my little notes here on the wall too. What else do I got?
Don't worry, we're not.
Some of the other things that are very important with rural properties as well is environmentally protected lands. And so some of the things that are protected in rural properties are like marshlands, rivers, creeks, streams. And that's just to name a few. So obviously you can't build on environmentally protected lands. Resale value is affected by that too. So that's something to take into consideration. And if you are looking at building an outbuilding or shed or anything like that, you're going to want to be in touch with the local municipalities to see what the requirements are for the setbacks to those environmentally protected lands. One of the other topics that I wanted to discuss as well is those were some of the restrictions as well, but bylaws. In my area where my house is located, it's zoned RR, which is rural residential. So you can always find out online what the bylaws are for your area. And one of the ones that I have, which is probably consistent with everybody, is for fireworks. So in my area, nobody can sell fireworks 7 days, any sooner than 7 days prior to Canada Day, Victoria Day, Labor Day, New Year's, big holidays like that. And you can't set them off in your backyard any sooner than 3 days before the aforementioned holidays. So basically, having a copy of the bylaws for the home and in the areas of where you're looking would be important to have. Same with the zoning, because if you have an intended use for what you're looking at buying a property for in a rural area, you want to make sure that the permitted uses for that zoning line up with what you want. And if there's restrictions, that doesn't affect the intended use of what you're looking to do. And that's basically the topics that I was going to cover today. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. If they do, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
One thing I'll add is something that we commonly get is, can I buy this lot and put a trailer on it? Most municipalities will not let you put a trailer on it unless it's in the zoning and official plan. Most places that you're able to put a trailer are actual trailer parks that are designated for that sort of thing. However, there is some municipalities that will allow you to have a trailer for a short period of time if you are building a home. But for the most part, if you're just buying the lot and you think you're going to throw a trailer on it and just visit it seasonally, that's not going to be the case. You're most likely going to be asked to remove it. It kind of devalues the area and it makes it look a little bit not great. So I had a property actually that I had someone looking at buying, and it was a beautiful $800,000 home, and right beside it was a sea can that someone had turned into a house. That also wasn't meeting the bylaw of what an actual structure and home is. So Prince Edward County made them remove it. So that's why it's important to know all the rules and regulations before you go ahead and buy the property, as well as what you can do to alter it. And the environmentally protected, you can have a site inspection to know all about the property from the Conservation Authority for about $200. And sometimes there's actually, it goes above and beyond the conservation, and you have to talk to the ministry because there might be, it might be zoned rural residential, but there might be some protected animals that live on that area. So I know that in Tyonega Township, there's a certain bird that's endangered, and there's pockets of land that you can't build on and do anything with. So, okay. What would a modular home fall under the same rules as a trailer, or would this classify as an actual home? That would depend on the municipality. If it's like a prefab home and it actually has a foundation and a well and septic component to it, it most likely would be okay. But if it's on wheels or is able to be moved easily, that's usually where they draw the line. So it's a fine line with a modular home, but prefabs are okay. Any other questions for Steve? Don't mind the peanut gallery of my cat in the background. That's Steve's information. If you have any questions about zoning or restrictions of a property, bylaws, and anything like that, please take down his information. He can advise you on that and any other real estate matters. So I'm going to dive into my topics. So wants to know the costs. So the costs associated with buying a home, there's obviously homeowner costs that come into effect once you own the home, but these are kind of the generic savings that you need above and beyond your down payment. So the home inspection typically runs from $400 to $500. And no, these people don't take cash. There's no getting around HST. They are registered businesses. So this is applicable to HST as well. The well and septic package, I think I'm right on around there, $400 to $550, depending on the location in the area. That's for your package deal. If you're just doing one or the other, then it can around the $250 mark or so for each. But if the homeowner is providing one, you should still do your own, and I'll get into that later. Steve, if you can keep an eye, can you see the chat bar and the, there's a chat bar and just a generic question toolbar?
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that.
Keep an eye on that for me. Okay, so the appraisal fee, Carly, I think I'm about right here. I'm just getting some factors. So the typical home, like, and I don't mean like really small home, but just a typical home is about $250 to $400. However, if you are buying a huge, large estate where it's a large farm, there's lots of buildings and components to it, or if it's a $1 million+ waterfront home, again with a lot of components to it, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 for the cost of an appraisal fee. Title insurance depends on the lender that you're going with, but approximately $250. Land transfer tax is based on your purchase price. So if you Google Land Transfer Tax Ontario, you can see the different structure. There's also lots of calculators. I have one on my website. It's Prince Edward County, or Homes for Sale in PrinceEdwardCounty.com. So if you want a mortgage calculator or a land transfer tax calculator, you can go to that. So this is the website here. Those are some tools that you can use. The land transfer tax, if you're a first-time buyer, you are usually exempt from this, right, Carly? Yep. The legal costs are about $1,500 and up. Depends on what firm you're going with. If you're going with a completely, swanky, fancy firm, you're probably going to be spending a lot more. But if you're going with our local firms, and again, this is really important to use a local resource because the lawyers in the city tend to not know anything about wells and septics, and they put up a lot of more red flags and make the deal a lot more complicated because they're not familiar with our systems down here. Same with lenders that are not from the area. They have no idea what they're dealing with. They don't realize that, for instance, in this area, we are really strapped for appraisers right now. So you really need to be getting that application in and getting the appraisal done right away, because that can really hold up something as well, because we are having bidding wars still. So the average conditional period is about 5 to 7 days. And if you need to ask for an extension on that, they're most likely going to go with another offer that's waiting at the door because they're going to see some struggle in financing. But really, it's just that we're waiting for an appraisal. So you really want to have someone that's really representing your best interests and knows the area so that they can make this a seamless process. And then the realtor costs are free. So the seller typically pays 5 to 4% in total commission. And then the seller pays us half of that. So typically we get 2 to 2.5%. And out of that, of course, we have to pay our franchise fees, taxes, the costs associated of, touring you around and things like that. So I can go over that later. Conditions in your offer. So, in a city offer, you're going to see about one page of Schedule A where it just has financing and home inspection. You might see lawyer's review and insurance, but typically it's a lot more straightforward in town. So you definitely want an agent that's familiar with the area and familiar with doing rural real estate, not just because we can guide you to these wonderful inspectors and connections that we have, but because there's a form called Web Forms, and it has all the standard AREA clauses in it, and they were designed by lawyers in Toronto that really have no idea about systems in the country. So we'll often find out-of-town agents will put in these crazy statements and warranties and conditions that really don't make any sense and are overcomplicating the whole process, which if you're going up against another offer, it's going to make your position not look great. So us as trained rural agents really know what are the right and conditions and statements to put in an offer to protect your needs. So one is financing. If you don't have say the home is $250,000, if you don't have $250,000 in your bank, you absolutely need to put a financing clause in, because if you fail to close on this, there's so much liability and repercussions that can come at you. So please don't feel like you are getting an advantage by not putting in financing clauses. I know a lot of people go kind of rogue in the city and they just put in no conditions and hope for the best. But here we are completely used to seeing conditions like these. So the realtors and the home sellers are very comfortable with seeing these. Home inspection, if you definitely want to include a home inspection. So for instance, if you're trying to have an offer that looks a little bit more favorable and you're like, I don't need a home inspection. One of the biggest things that can bite you in the butt is if you move into the home and you find a major defect that you can prove that the previous homeowner knew about and didn't disclose, and you have to go to court over this, the judge is going to look at you and say, well, did you even do a home inspection? And it's not going to make your position look good. So I know a lot of people think home inspections are a waste of money, but it can help you if you ever have to go into a legal matter. And again, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not trying to give you legal advice. A lawyer, real estate lawyer or litigation lawyer can advise you on that. Septic and well inspection. Typically, waterfront septics are definitely something that costs a lot more. But these two systems, septic 25 to 30,000. Well, they usually say $100 per every 10 feet, right? For a drilled well, or is it more now?
It's a harder question to ask, but I mean, you're basically, an easier way of looking at it is your minimum setup cost to get at any depth, depending what you're drilling through, is going to be $6,000 to $7,000.
Yeah.
And depending what you're drilling through and how deep you need to go, it can be kind of up from there. So I was just speaking to a driller the other day about the best way to ballpark a price, and it's a longer answer, but I guess you could estimate it at $70 a foot. But again, there's variables there. But.
Okay. Yeah. So obviously, two very expensive systems. So why not pay $550 to find out if they work or not? And we can test these systems pretty much all year round as well. And Steve and I have actually had about 5 in a row septics that failed. So it's extremely important to test these systems. Potable water testing. Again, we went over that. It's important for your mortgage. If you have any kind of financing, they're going to want to see that the water is potable. So it's a little water bottle, and I take the screen off of the inside tap, clean it out usually with a little bit of Lysol just in case there's dirt or grime in the tap. And I run the water. It has to be cold water. I run it for usually 10 minutes before I take the test. And then I fill up the bottle. I take it right away into the lab, and it takes about 3 days to come back. and they test the health unit tests for bacteria and for E. coli. Now, typically we want to see a 0-0 test, but different lenders, if there's a little bit of bacteria in it, because not all bacteria is bad, they usually will consider, some will consider that potable, but ideally for if you have children or anything like that, we really want to see that 0-0. Lawyer's review. So this is really important. If you have anything that's kind of complicated, like for instance, maybe you don't have a survey and you're worried about easements or right-of-ways over the property, and maybe the seller has added in some weird terms in your negotiations. This is your time for the lawyer to look over it before you firm up the deal, because typically the lawyers don't get the agreement of purchase and sale and all the amendments and waivers and everything attached until the deal is firm. So if there's anything kind of fishy or red flaggy that you're concerned with, you really should have a condition in there that your lawyer approves of the documentation. In an agreement purchase to sale, there is a standard clause saying that the property needs to be insurable. So this is, again, like, it's really important to have Ted do an inspection, because one of the biggest issues we run into is galvanized plumbing and knob and tube wiring, which the insurers completely red flag, as well as if you have oil heat, you want to see a recent TSSA and know the age of the tank, because with oil heat, they won't give you insurance if the tank is a certain age, and they want to make sure that the furnace and tank are running well. So we ask the homeowners to do what's called a TSSA report. So you can include an insurance clause. So say you're buying a property that you might think is going to be quite expensive on the replacement cost, so the price can be high. So for instance, if you're buying a old country house that's a triple brick construction, the insurance companies actually price that out as if they were going to rebuild a triple brick construction house. So your premium on a triple brick is going to be very expensive. The same with the limestone Ontario cottage style property. So you want time to have to speak with your insurance lender and know what the premium and the terms are before signing off on this, because it could be something that you are not budgeting for. Again, I have all the time, I have people that will come and get quotes from their existing insurance brokers in the city, and they'll be super high. We have mutual lenders here, Bay Quinte Mutual, Hamilton. There's a couple other ones. I've been out of the business for a while, that I've seen the premiums be half of what the city insurance brokers are trying to offer. So again, it's really important to reach out to a local source, and you can ask Steve or I who some of those insurance brokers are, good companies. It's important to get a quote from them before you firm up on this deal. If you need to sell a house, can include this condition. However, there's usually a 24, 48 hour or 72 hour escape clause, meaning that your offer can be bumped for a more suitable offer if the seller receives one. So it will be conditional, but again, if someone comes in with a more suitable offer, it can then your offer, you'll be asked to, in 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours, to completely firm and waive all your conditions or back out. If you're selling a home, something, I know this isn't a seller seminar, but it's kind of important to touch on, and you're worried about not like selling your home and then not having somewhere to go, you can talk with your listing agent. There is a clause, it's called suitable accommodation clause, meaning that you receive an offer, you insert this, it's your clause as a seller. If you don't find a house to go to, then you can back out of that deal and not be forced to sell your house. A lot of buyers typically don't want to see that, because especially with a country property, they're investing well over $1,000 in inspections for you to be like, oh, you know what? I just changed my mind. I can't find anywhere to go. So you really want to be looking and have something in mind that you can go to. But there is that clause to make you feel a little bit more comfortable. So further elements of an agreement, purchase and sale, irrevocable date. So this is what keeps everything binding and on the books. So Irrevocable time. So I, as the buyer, write you an offer. It's irrevocable by me for you to respond by 7 p.m. that evening. So a couple of things. If you're trying to lowball somebody, one of the tricks is to show them that you're not desperate, because as agents, we're here to put on the poker face for you, because you're going to be all emotional and excited, and your desperation will be pouring out of you. So irrevocable date will be the back and forth, keeping the timeline going. So the seller will sign back, and they'll give you a timeline to respond to their counter offer, and things like that. There's things what we call bully offers, where we'll send in an offer and give you 2 hours for the seller to respond. Typically, the sellers kind of say no. And if they even sniff out that there's other offers coming, they will say no and say, you're welcome to resubmit, but you're not going to bully me into this. So if you're going to do a bully offer, you better be coming with your best terms. Completion date, also known as closing date. This can be really important in negotiations. You want to have your realtor ask what the closing date is. So the other day I had a scenario where we had 4 offers, and the highest bid was 15,000 over asking, and we didn't end up going with it. We went with the next bid over because we couldn't match up closing dates. My sellers, they couldn't change their closing date, especially with COVID. They didn't have anywhere to go in the meantime, and the buyer was being really stubborn and thought that he had some grounds right now, and this place was in a bidding war. So we actually turned down his offer because we couldn't match up closing dates. So it's really important to know before you put in an offer what closing date the seller is looking for. Requisition date is for this is a period in which your lawyer must determine if there is any problems with title of the property, and it's usually set 7 to 15 days prior to the completion date. So this is when they'll search title and everything like that. There's also title insurance, but a lawyer can go over these the requisition date in detail more. If you want a local lawyer, I can give you some resources. So fixtures. Fixtures are permanently fixated to the property. For an example, a bathtub, sink, toilet, anything permanently plumbed in would be considered a fixture. Technically, anything nailed to the building is a fixture, while items screwed in, because screws can't be removed, are chattels, or can be removed, are chattels. This is often an area of contention. So if you have any doubt, put it in as a chattel. Okay, so there's also rental items. So one thing to look at too is the rental items, which I didn't put here on my screen. Most oftentimes it's the hot water tank. So you want to know the terms of that rental if you're going to assume it. Same with propane supplier or oil supplier for heating. Also, sometimes people do whole payment plans on air conditionings and furnaces. You definitely don't want to be getting into these contracts. So you would want to ask that be paid out. You don't want to assume that before closing. Chattels, so they can be storage sheds. They're unlike fixtures, they're not deemed to be part of the property. So appliances, lawn tractors, area rugs, ceiling fans, chandeliers, and other light fixtures, drapes, wood burning stove and accessories, garden sets, garden furniture, central vacuum equipment, barbecues, things like that. So if there's anything that you want and to put in your offer that isn't fixated to the property, then you really need to go over this. Deposit requirements. For some reason in our area, the deposit requirements aren't as large as what they are in the city. So typically in the city, they want to see 5 to 10% down. Here, it's usually only a couple $1,000s. However, if you're asking for like a 6 to 8 month closing, they're probably going to ask for that at least 5%, because they are taking a chance that you could not close if with the longer closing, and that the market could change drastically in the meantime. The deposit also normally has to be in within 24 hours. So this can be done by direct wire, e-transfer, personal check, or money order. And it's always given to the listing brokerage. If you don't have your deposit in within 24 hours, your offer can be deemed as null and void. So you want to make sure that you definitely get that information of where it needs to be transferred to. So it's 24 hours from time of acceptance of the offer. So as soon as your offer becomes conditionally accepted. Statements, warranties, work to be completed. So this is unlike conditions. These are statements saying, for instance, the seller represents and warrants that the septic system and all the components of it have been good working order, that never had any issues with it. We want the home left in broom swept condition, want all garbage and personal items not included in the offer removed. And sometimes you can also put in, if these things aren't done, at what cost does it come? So if you have a kind of a to-do list for them to, you know, clean up the property, you should have a statement in there that says, if they don't complete this, at what cost does it come out of them? And there'll be what's called a holdback period, where the lawyer will negotiate a cost for that not being completed. Okay, step-by-step process. So first things first is you want to connect with a realtor in that local area, because they can offer a lot of resources of a well and septic inspector, a mortgage specialist, a home inspector, a lawyer, anything really. We're your number one resource for the community. So, so you want to connect with us first. Then you want to obtain a pre-approval or have your finances in order. This is really important because you don't want your conditional period to be really long. You want to know what you're looking at, so that basically when you put an offer in, it's just really, it's not even approving you, it's approving the property at that point. Building a list of must-have. Be realistic with your price point. We get a lot of champagne taste on a beer budget. So have your agent show you what you can afford. It's important to know what you can afford, but what's available for what you can afford too. So some things might be important, like you might have to have a garage or she shed or man cave. You might have to have a large yard. You might want privacy, things like that. So really want to build a list with your realtor and see what's available for your price range. Then if you find some that meet your criteria, go out and view them. Do not call the listing agent to show you the home. So as buyer's agents, we're here to look after you. So everyone has this kind of misconception that the listing agent is going to give you a better deal. It's true. So the listing agent's number one thing to do is look after the seller and get the most amount of money. And you as a buyer want the best terms for yourself, and you want to get it for the least amount of money. So it's best to have your own representation. So you want to do that. So you want to go view the homes. The buyer agents, we set up all the tours. If you have any questions, get all the answers from the listing agents, and we might have other resources as well to get the answers if the listing agents don't have them. Negotiate and submit an offer. So this is when you start the negotiation process. If your offer gets accepted and have conditions, it's called the condition period, which is typically 5 to 7 business days. And then once you become a firm agreement, ask us for a moving checklist, because there's so many things you don't think about when moving to a new area. And this is also when you want to line up an appointment with a lawyer if you haven't already done so previously. The final walkthrough is very important. This is to make sure that the property is in the state that you purchased it in, and that everything has been left that's included as chattels. So if someone's moved a piece of furniture and then you see a massive hole in the wall, this is your time to go to your lawyer, take pictures of it, and send them, you know, these issues and say, this isn't what I signed up for, and this is again where the holdbacks will come into effect for that. So typically we do the final walkthroughs a couple days so that we can communicate with the lawyers if there's any issues. We want to do them usually when the seller has moved out or moved a lot of the stuff out. So again, we can see behind what the furniture and rugs were hiding. You can also do, if you want 2 walkthroughs, so say your closing date's a really long time and you kind of forget what the home is like, we can go in midway and do one for measurements and to take pictures so that you know what furniture and appliances or decor items that you need to buy. So the last thing I want to run through is just touching on the fact that you want to hire local resources. So one of the most important things that I see is the fact that the realtors coming into the city don't have access to our real estate board, so therefore they can't see what the homes in that compare to the one you're buying have sold for. And oftentimes there's quite a few properties that are extremely overpriced. So they will come in and they'll advise you to buy it, but they will have no idea about our market and if that property is actually a good price or not. So it's really important to have someone with local resources that has the access to this information. As well as I already talked about the reasonings why it's important to have local inspectors. For instance, like Jeff, he knows a lot of the areas that have good and bad water. I can call him up and say, hey, I'm looking at this house in this area. Do you know anything about that area and what the wells are typically like? However, you know, you can walk a couple feet and it can be completely different, but there are some generic areas that are just typically known to have bad water. So it's really important to have a local resource representing you and having your own agent as a buyer's agent, because the selling agents are really just in it for the listing for the sellers. They're not there to protect your interests. So actually in some, I believe it's Alberta, it's outlawed that listing agents can't represent both sides. In a lot of industries, you can't double represent. So be cautious of that. Does anyone have any questions?
I think I see one that maybe we missed here.
Okay.
So if you don't mind if I answer it, but I just see it's from, I think, Natasha. How do you go about getting the money for home improvement added on to your mortgage? So I'll just touch on that a little bit again. You would want to reach out to your mortgage professional that you trust, and they will set you up. They'll guide you along the way with that. So usually you have to have some quotes for the renovations that you want done. But basically, we walk you through all of that, and that's when we apply for the mortgage for you. That's the mortgage we will request. So that's how you go about that.
All right, well, I think this pretty much wraps up anything, but we'll just give it a couple minutes here to see if anyone has anything that they want to ask. We are recording this, so we will post it to YouTube and social media. And this is my email if anyone wants a link to the recording to share with anyone, or to rewatch again, or has any questions.
Alex, I do, just to mention too, I do have some good resources I kind of found I think would be helpful for people interested when they do become owners of these systems. So well owners information package. I have a homeowner's guide to a healthy septic system and a couple other ones. So if people want to email me or email you, then we can make sure that they get those.
Great. So I'll just go back to your screen here. Oh. Anyone wants any of those packages? Email, website, and phone number for Jeff. Okay, well, I think that's a wrap. So thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks to all my panelists. We will be hosting more of these, so stay tuned.